All righty. Thank you everyone for joining us today for our Hybrid Gap webinar. This webinar will be recorded and all attendees will receive a copy of the recording via email after the webinar is over. Please feel free to submit questions at any time during the presentation using the Q&A feature that is located at the bottom of your screen. We will answer questions at the end of the presentation. This webinar is an extension of the Hybrid Gap white paper, which was a research collaboration between TalenTrust and Optimize Inc. Marc Emmer, one of our speakers, is president of Optimize Inc., a management consulting firm specializing in strategic planning and employee engagement, serving the mid-market. Our other speaker, Kathleen Quinn Votaw, is founder and CEO of TalenTrust, author of Solve the People Puzzle and Dare to Care in the Workplace. She is a globally sought after keynote speaker, podcast host, and expert on all things retention, recruitment, and culture. And now I'm going to turn it over to Marc.
Thank you, Madison. Good morning, everybody. Greetings from Los Angeles. Happy Friday. You know, in our travels and research, what we've learned is there's quite disparate opinions about the value of working remotely, and employers and their employees have differing views on things like productivity and best practices. So what we wanted to do this morning was share an objective viewpoint based on data so that you could all make fact-based decisions. So where I'd like to start is with some general information about employment trends. And I think a lot of people were really surprised by the May jobs report that came out last week, where the U.S. economy added 339,000 jobs, which would suggest there's still quite a bit of heat in our economy, and there will be continued wage inflation for some time. So what we really have is a supply and demand problem, right? The economy is still adding jobs, while the labor participation rate is still only about 62%. The number of quits did decline a little bit in Q1 this year, but overall quits are up about 30% since before the pandemic. And I think as a result of that, the repercussion is we see a decline in employee engagement. And I would suspect that a lot of it is that employees having more choices are expecting more of their employers. So what Gallup is reporting is around the time that a lot of employers were demanding that their employees came back in the office, the number of actively engaged employees declined, and the number of actively disengaged employees actually increased. There's also been what I would say some probably unfair reporting on certain things. A graph like this showed up in the Wall Street Journal about 3 months ago. And the reporter kind of implied that the number of people working remotely was declining quickly, but the numbers they used were based on federal statistics that cited the number of establishments. So an establishment is every Holiday Inn, every McDonald's. So in terms of the number of work sites, they kind of over-escalated the number of organizations that were remaining hybrid. So I would suggest in corporate environments, that number is actually a lot higher. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to do our own study. And our firm collaborated with Kathleen's, and we studied 53 employers and 1,057 employees in April, and we'd be happy to share our findings. So
I think, can I join in, Marc, for
yes,
a minute?
please.
I think on that last slide, I think was really important. Sometimes we get data just from ourselves, employers.
Yes.
What was cool about this study with Marc is we captured the voice of the employee too. So that's why we're so excited about this data. It's about us all coming together and figuring this stuff out. So pay attention to the data because it's the voice of your employees and our own voices too.
Well said, Kathleen. Thank you. So here are some of the things that we found. A staggering 96% of employees would prefer to work remotely or in a hybrid situation. 81% of them 81% of them feel that their employers are providing good tools for them to do that.
Yes.
But this next statistic, I think, is one of the key learnings from the study. Only 17% of employers are structuring office days around high value activities. And the reason why this is really, really important is employees do not want to get up early, get dressed, get their kids to daycare, commute into the office, and sit on Zoom meetings. That is very dismotivating for them. So one thing that all employers really need to do is they need to set an intention on what should happen on the days when people are in the office, and structure activities, whether they be one-to-ones or KPI reviews or whatever, for those days, so people really feel like they're getting a return on actually going into the office. Another thing that was really surprising to us was only 13% of employees felt that their career progression was in some way going to be impacted by the fact that they were working remotely. So we'll show you the more specifics about that in a moment. But in terms of all of the content that Kathleen and I are sharing with you, we organized it around these three things, which we feel like you really need to get right to be an employer of choice in this environment, which are career progression, comp, and flexibility, and in no particular order. But I'm going to start with career progression. So we used an index from 1 to 100, 100 being highest, and the things with the highest score are the most enabled by remote. So as we look at the career progression activities, what was really interesting about it is a lot of them got I would say a mediocre score, but clearly the thing that we don't want to be doing remotely is new hire orientation. As best you can, and hybrid's not for everyone, but for companies that can enable remote, very important that where new employees, their onboarding be done in person in the office. Another really interesting learning was around training and development. So a lot of us who are progressive, we're spending a lot of time talking about things like mentoring and career pathing. But what really matters to employees is skills acquisition. So we want to make sure that we are and also skills acquisition is enabled by hybrids. So that is something that you can do through your LMS and so on, but want to make sure that we're investing in skills acquisition for our employees. Now I'm going to switch gears and talk about flexibility. Many of you probably noted the study that came out a few months ago that was done in the UK around the 4-hour work week. Now, I'm not here to advocate that you should all go to the 4-hour work week. I think that's going to be very difficult to pull off in the United States. However, there's really a key learning from this, and that is many companies in this study actually shut it down early because their employee retention went up so fast that they decided that they were going to incorporate the 4-hour work week on a permanent basis. So again, I'm not advocating for 4-hour work, but I think the broader point here is we can't define what flexibility is for employees. We need to let our employees define what flexibility means. And this is what they indicated in our survey.
Mark in here, I'm going to jump in if you don't mind,
Sure.
Mark, here too. This 4-day work week, Adam Grant came out, if anybody follows him, and said, let's all go to a 4-day work week. Well, guess what? Not all of our businesses fit a 4-day work week, as Mark just said. And the point of flexibility is flexibility has to fit your company, your employees, your leaders, your managers. And one size does not fit all in any equation, and especially this equation. So be careful that you don't adopt what somebody else is doing. Make sure you consider what your internal customers, your employees want to do.
Yeah, I think we're definitely saying the same thing. And this is what the survey results revealed was the thing that was best enabled by remote that employees value is their health and wellness. And I don't think that's just a COVID thing, right? That's being able to get to the gym and take care of yourself and eat well and all those kinds of things. I'd also like you to really note the difference between perceived productivity and what employees say is their actual productivity. And even more surprising is what employers said. The employers even acknowledged a gap between perceived productivity and actual productivity, which I'll come back to in a moment. Now, I don't think that this slide, I don't think there is a clear cause and effect and it's linear and it's true for every industry. But I think it's of note that in many of the industries that have the lowest turnover are also the ones that have the highest proportion of remote employees. So I think that's kind of the undercurrent here is as we're thinking about things like productivity, we also need to be thinking about the impact on turnover and wages and other things. And so speaking of which, I'm going to jump to compensation. And those of you who have been tracking me over the last year, you know I've been beating this drum pretty loudly because I think a lot of, again, the federal statistics that are reported are not always really on point. We use ADP data, and what the ADP data is showing us is that as through May, so this data is hot off the press, the average person who stayed in place in the US, their wages have gone up 6.5%. And those who are changing jobs, their wages have gone up 12%. So there continues to be heat in the economy as it relates to job demand. And the implication of that is continued wage inflation. And don't shoot the messenger, but that's what the data is telling us. Even if the market is starting to cool, the jobs report suggests the market is not cooling very fast. Now, this slice is the same data by industry. So what you'll notice is industries like accommodations and leisure, the wage inflation is a little higher, but I would say for most industries, it's in that 6% Mendoza range roughly. Here's the same slice by company size. So the smaller companies might have a little difficulty keeping up with larger companies, but really it's kind of across the board that we're seeing this continued wage inflation.
Mark, can I jump in here?
Yes, please.
As well, we had a question from Mike Thorne about industry specificity, right? So he said we'll be getting into how this discussion applies to industries versus a broad discussion. He's convinced that so many studies are driving people to think it is either or a yes, no. And I think you're talking about industries right now. It's a great time to make sure Mike gets his question answered.
Yes, that's a great question. And I agree. It varies dramatically by industry. So in one of my earlier slides, I showed that in information technology, for example, the number of remote employees is more than 70%. And we know in manufacturing, for example, it would be a lot less than that. And per Kathleen's comment, you know, if you receive raw materials 5 days a week and you're a manufacturer, you're going to shut your plant for one day or for the weekend. Or say you were doing 3 shifts before, you know, that would be too big a lift. So I think we clearly understand that there's going to be great variances by industry. But what I really want to drive home is this is not black and white. You know, we need to provide an environment that our employees perceive as flexible as opposed to our definition of flexible. And that's going to require some work where we kind of dig in deep and understand what our employees really want and need if we're gonna do a good job retaining them.
Mm-hmm. Well said, sir.
Sure. Okay, so I do want to speak a little more about productivity. I know this is a hot potato for a lot of people. It's like the third rail of this conversation. So not surprising, in our study, employees overwhelmingly reported that they're in many job functions that they were more productive working at home than in the office. I know there will be some employers who will disagree with that. I have a good friend who works in Manhattan, and yesterday, while the air quality index was over 375, demanded that their office employees come into the office, and I was mortified. I mean, that's an example of, thinking of things in terms of black and white, where we really need to be maybe more flexible. But I think this is, just a really important slide that everyone absorb. And this is the US labor productivity in the United States. What happened right after the beginning of the pandemic is productivity actually spiked. And of course it did, because unemployment was really high. So if you take workers out of the workforce and your output is roughly the same, you're going to have higher productivity. And then what happened is a year later, there were people going on the news saying productivity dropped. But of course, productivity dropped because you were comparing it with a time when productivity was artificially high. So I think the correct measurement is where is productivity versus where it was before the pandemic started. And if anything, we've seen a drop in productivity in the last year as people have been demanded to come back into the office. But what I would invite everyone to do is to ignore all that noise and merely look at the legend on the left of the graph, because the range of productivity increases and decreases is trading in like a 3% range. So for me, that's one of the key conclusions from this study is if your productivity is going to be roughly the same or even slightly diminished because you're in a hybrid environment, but you have a much better chance of retaining your employees because you're flexible. And perhaps you won't be under so much pressure on a compensation standpoint. I would suggest that that's a trade-off that most employers should be willing to accept. But as Kathleen mentioned, you kind of all have to do the right thing for your particular business and for your employees. And with that, I am going to kick it over to my good friend, Kathleen.
Hello, everyone. I love working with Marc Emmer. If you don't work with him, I'm going to highly recommend him. We had a blast putting together this for you, and everything that Marc has said is true and useful. And please don't forget to put your notes and questions into Q&A. We're having it monitored. This is your webinar, not ours. We built this for you. So what does all that data mean in the first place? What are we supposed to do with it? So my section is what to do with it, a roadmap forward. So what we found from thousands of employees and 53 of people like us, because Marc and I run businesses as well, the sweet spot of the hybrid hustle, hybrid gap is if you're going to work at home 2 or 3 days a week, technical goal setting, one-to-one sales support, that works really nice. In the office team meetings, onboarding, and I want to spend some time on onboarding, and in-person client interactions. Don't make somebody drive 30 to 60 minutes to have a Zoom call from the office. That's just not okay, because they're just going to get crabby, and it's a waste of time and a waste of money and a waste of, as Marc said, productivity. Why can't I just do that from the house? So look at the job duties, the competencies, and what could be done at home. Even if you're in construction, manufacturing, engineering, which are industries we love, healthcare, some of that stuff you cannot do at your house. Let's just all agree. But you know what? Paperwork you can do from the house. You absolutely can do it from your office at home. You don't always have to go into the office to do that. And next, recruiting. Supply and demand is not in our favor. There are 10 million open jobs and only about 6 million people to fulfill them. These are real numbers that came out on June 1st. They came out on June 1st. June 2nd, sorry. So these are real, these matter. We have to pay attention to the data, which that means there's like 2 people for every open job. So it's tricky out there, and we need to make sure that we have the supply to fulfill the positions we have open. And also some of our people might make choices to leave. They are in the driver's seat, ladies and gentlemen, and they know it. And so Marc made a point earlier, we have to talk to our employees and listen to them about what they need to create an environment for our unique companies to make sure we can attract people, but also this is tied to retention. Many of you who might know me, I'm the retention and recruiting gal, and retention starts on the first touch. Onboarding is a really important part of this too, because onboarding in the office 2 to 3 days a week, we find that people don't have onboarding plans. They have orientation plans. A good onboarding plan is a 6-month, well thought out plan that is executed directly by the manager and some other thought leaders in the company. And we have a cheat sheet on our website, TalenTrust.com. Go download the onboarding do-it-yourself guide and make sure you make the people who you're bringing on, who are with you and bringing on, feel special. Okay. From the labor issues are going to persist. Our friends at ITR Economics also back us up on this data. There's about 0.5 people for every open job. They believe it's going to persist for the next 3 to 5 years. Just talked to Alan literally 30 days ago. We've had boomers exit the workforce. We've had women exit the workforce. We've had young people exit the workforce. We've had men exit the workforce and try to do something different. So this isn't going away anytime soon, and we need to find a solution to it.
Kathleen, I'm really sorry, but your sound is got real choppy. For a minute, like you're underwater.
I'm a scuba diver, so that might be. I'm sorry if nobody could hear me for a moment.
Okay, that's better now. I think it's just your Wi-Fi. Okay,
it might be a little bit of a problem. Sorry. We had little issues earlier today, so I'm going to do my best. So how do you train your leaders how to lead in this hybrid gap scenario? We have to make sure they refocus their skills in a virtual world. I can walk into your office virtually just as much as I can physically if I'm in the same office with you. We have to make sure we trust each other and ensure that we have some boundaries between work and life. There's a little thing on Outlook and Google that has delayed delivery on emails. Respect your team and they'll respect each other. So we're not working at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning. Communication is going to be more important than ever. We have to over-communicate, and then over-communicate again. This is new to all of us, right, Mark? I mean, it's new to you, it's new to me, it's new to the employees. It is new. And not everybody knows what they're doing.
Kathleen, if I could double down on that point, we've learned during the pandemic that corporate communication is more important than it's ever been. And I've heard frustration on the part of managers will say, well, we made that announcement. We had that town hall. And I remind them, just like in business development, you need to tell the client something 7 times before they hear you. I think that is the case right now with internal communications.
Mm-hmm. It is the case. And people need to have more information than ever before. And unfortunately, I think my internet is unstable right now. I'm going to have Roger.
Kathleen, I think we might have to do plan B and let Roger couple of slides because you are like fish in a fishbowl right now.
Yep, I'll have Roger jump in here. Roger Cunningham to the rescue.
Sure. Your internet's stable now, but I can jump in here. But I think just to kind of pick up where we left off, hybrid is just as important in the hybrid model remotely to cover your bases here and create an environment to where your leadership and train your leadership to shine and lead in a remote environment just as well as they would in the office. And that's starts here developing those leadership skills. They come with some of these skills, these soft skills from leadership, but that's something that should be an ongoing training, and training can be ramped up, especially for remote, because they have to pick that up. And soft skills being empathy and emotional quotients and understanding and developing those soft skills. I think next up would be trust and autonomy. You have to, we've got trust and autonomy. You have to train your leaders within your organization to trust the team to get their jobs done. And trust and develop that relationship of autonomy. Set yourself up with metrics and a system that you can build that trust, and just because you're not physically there with them, the autonomy is developed within your team that they can get the job done, and let them go. And that includes the leaders of the leaders as well, of trusting your leaders to develop that. So set boundaries for work-life balance. That's very, very important. I think we all learned that lesson during the pandemic, but not just, it's kind of flowed. And as Kathleen and Mark said earlier, this isn't going away. This is here to stay. This hybrid model and the remote model, and that setting those boundaries of when to shut off, when to stop communicating, when to start communicating, all of those boundaries, so people can thrive in their personal life and shut off. And because it's not just packing up and getting in the car and driving home anymore, it's literally standing up and walking in the next room. So it's very important to kind of trust, create that trust and autonomy, and set those boundaries where people feel very comfortable in that setting, just as they would of shutting off and starting up in the office. As far, and then communication is key in these, because if you're not using Teams or Slack or some type of direct messaging system, I would assume most are in the hybrid setting, but just to communicate on a regular basis, it looks to build that trust. And that's how you gain that trust and that autonomy through that communication, and building with offline and online. Telephone still works, guys. Picking that up, and also on communication, what is your communication style? What should be an email? What should be a direct message? What should be a phone call? Lots of things are going through text messages now versus verbal and visual. What information from a leadership standpoint to an employee, and from an employee to a leadership standpoint, should be more of a conversation versus a direct message? Things do get lost in that. So you should have documentation with your leadership team and with your company of what that looks like. What is the different style of communication? And as Kathleen always brings up, which with our team is that it's not the same for everyone. What style of communication works for your employees, not just your employees, but that employee. Is someone more apt to respond well to an email? Does someone need more time with you on the phone or in person? Or is a direct message going to suffice? So set those guidelines of and communication, and then talk about it amongst your organization. Talk about what that looks like. Ask your team how they best want to be communicated with, but you need to create that, and then your leadership needs to understand that from each and every individual, and it needs to feed itself up. And then
Roger, could I jump in for a second, and then maybe we can
absolutely,
Kathleen. One thing that we've certainly covered in past webinars is, in March of 2020, we sent everybody home and we said, be safe, learn Teams. And that didn't go well. And I would say, fast forward to today, there's a lot of companies that have not done what you just said, do not have a clear communication protocol, and people literally do not know in a given message, are they supposed to use email? Are they supposed to use Teams? Are they supposed to use some chat feature or whatever? And this idea of working in work threads, which is certainly the best way to collaborate, has not been widely adopted across the economy. So, if you're still using internal email, you're probably not using work threads for your internal communication. So I do think we need to reset on that. I think part of the problems is so many people just can't stand Teams because it has some limitations. My understanding is Microsoft is coming out with a significant upgrade to it in the next month or two. And we're hopeful that people will be able to collaborate more effectively. Kathleen, can we just get a little sound check and see if you're back?
Hi, I'm sound check, but I'm completely unstable. I am many that already. So I'm going to say something while I can. Everyone learns differently, to Roger's last point and Mark's great point. And I'm going to make sure that Mark and Roger talk now, because my I am demonstrating the hybrid gap. I'm with you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to be quiet until I get back online, but Roger and Mark will be your Sherpas through the rest of the conversation. But everybody in your team learns differently, they adapt differently, and it's going to be harder for you as an employer because we're going to have to put together different learnings, visual, kinesthetic, auditory, written, and reinforce it more frequently. And our leadership needs to really win back the trust. It really was diminished during 2020 and beyond. And we need to train how to build transparency. There's a great book, Roger, take over when stable again, called Fierce Conversations. I'll give it back to Roger.
Yep. So leaders are getting trusted literally at 95% when this trifecta is strongly present: leading, supporting change, communicating clearly and consistently, and then inspiring confidence in the future. So showing them that path, communicating clearly any changes within the company, especially now that they're not there to, we're not all together all the time to see it. So communication, going back to the other, is key. The large conversations within the company of what's happening, and then supporting change, which also means leading and supporting change and understanding what that looks like and listening to your team.
Can you
Okay.
advance the slide, Kathleen? Yeah.
I sure can if I can. Yeah. This is my favorite slide, so I'll try really hard to talk about it for a minute. I really love the focus on employee experience versus employee engagement, because it really puts your people first. And Vida was talking about open office hours in the Q&A, which I'm sure Mark and Roger will get to. But if you put them first and what they need first, because guess what, they're working to provide a great life for their families, you're going to have a better experience as a business owner. I promise you that every day in the week. Then make sure that you recognize them. You help them understand, what you stand for, what community you're trying to build. Recognition doesn't have to be a medal to everybody. It has to be pure and authentic and tied to your core values. Training your people to have those fierce conversations, and establishing trust with the people who work with and for you. Roger mentioned empathy. What does empathy mean to you, Roger?
I think listening and putting yourself in their shoes and understanding where they're coming from. And we've all mostly, and if you're a leader, you've likely been in their shoes before. So understanding where they're coming from, and I think it's listening and seeking to understand before you're judging, and really working on that empathizing with the situation and coming up with a solution together instead of dictating the situation. As a leader, sometimes you have to fight against that. So I think it's just listening and seeking to understand before you react.
How about you, Mark?
I also think it's meeting employees where they are and understanding their individual circumstances, right? Like why would you create an arbitrary work rule, like be in the office 9 to 5, and treat, the single mother at home with 2 children the same as, a recent college graduate? I think we need to engage our employees in a conversation of what flexibility looks like. So we're creating an environment where they can thrive and they'll want to spend their entire career with us.
Wonderful definitions. And in my book, Dare to Care in the Workplace, one of the chapters talks about building your Camelot. If you're old enough, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not old enough, here's what I'm talking about. Camelot is a moment in time where everything's working great. The clients are happy, the employees are happy, you're happy. We're just singing off the same sheet of music in perfect harmony. Now, let's be honest, that doesn't happen all the time. We hit moments of a Camelot community. So working toward that together, where everybody is aligned in what we're trying to do and move forward and what our growth looks like and why, That's what we're shooting for. It's not me telling you what to do. It's you and I collaborating on what's the next move. Certainly, I'm the quarterback. I own the place. I'm the employer. I matter, but you have a voice in what we're building too. That's what the employee experience is all about. So Q&A and next steps. I know we have a lot of Q&A, and I know Mark, Shannon is going to help us with this, but before we move to Q&A, I want to have you understand how to follow up with us. You can text the word hybrid, spelled HYBRID, to 33777 from your cell phone, and you'll receive the entire deck from today's conversation. All of you will receive the recording, which, mine was a little shaky, let's be honest. But you all, if you want to get the entire deck, you type the word hybrid to 33777. Please make sure you download a copy of the hybrid paper, and also reach out to us, and let's dive into the questions.
Kathleen, before I do, I just want to offer one, I think, really important conclusion. As many of you know, I'm a strategy facilitator, and I would say that hiring and retaining talent has become the #1 strategic constraint for most of our clients. So for me, this isn't just about the employee experience, it's about competitiveness. If you have the ability to attract and retain, then that is going to give you a leg up on your competition. So if for no other reason, I hope that you will all continue to invest in employee experience, and the things we've covered today will support that. Shannon, my colleague Shannon is monitoring questions. Any questions we haven't answered or things that have come up in the Q&A that are relevant, do you think?
We do have a question regarding communication. This refers to the Vistage idea of open office hours. So Vita said that she was trying this out. She opened her teams once a week for a couple of hours so that people could drop in. And it worked just okay. It wasn't great, but she does want to continue to encourage that type of informal internal communication. So how do you both recommend people encourage like drop-in type of communication when people are hybrid?
I'm not unstable at the moment. So I think that's a great idea, that the open office hours concept, people come and go when they can and when it fits the life they want to lead, provided our customers get served. Our customers and the work and the products and services have to get served. So, I know that it was just okay, not great, but I would keep trying it and perfecting it. What we try things sometimes and we said, that didn't work, right? Sometimes it takes time to perfect a process internally. Mark is a strategist. How long does it take your clients to adopt, learn and then adopt the methodologies that you teach them?
Yeah, like I would say, a lot of our clients realize that they may come up with an innovative idea and they may not even sell any in the market, but the fact that they're leading by being an innovator, they get credit for that in the market. I'd say similar to this situation, if your door is open, people may not come to that door, but by virtue of the fact that they know your door is open, they know you're a credible employer and someone who cares about their well-being. So I think it's certainly a great thing to experiment with.
Mm-hmm. Great.
We have another question. How do you create culture in a virtual environment, particularly if employees are spending a lot of time on calls with clients and not spending as much time with each other internally?
I'd start with bringing the fun. Let's make it fun. Work does not have to be this grind or boring or, methodical all the time. We learned during the shutdown that we could have happy hours virtually. We could have scavenger hunts virtually. We could read books together and talk about the content. We could just have time together. My team is completely remote and virtual and has been for 20 years. We walk into each other's offices virtually. We don't have to set up a meeting. We just press our Teams, and in we come. Full faith, and everything is right there. So there's a lot of ways to have fun with creating a community that cares about one another. Also making sure that you create different ways to communicate. So email, text, through video as well. And if you have a virtual or remote workforce, invite them to come in and visit on site at least 2 times a year, if not 4 times a year.
Oh,
at least 2 times.
oh, you mean people out of your community 2 times a year?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, at least 2 times a year. If not, if you're smaller, 4 times if you're larger and have the budget for it, because you might have like I do, a multi-state payroll, right? I have people in 16 different states now, so we bring people in twice a year, and it's, for a couple days, and it helps build community. But the rest of the time, we're doing this hybrid hustle gap thing here that we've been doing this morning. Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I agree. And there was an interesting thing about the question. One thing that we also learned in the hybrid gap is the importance of client communication still need to be in person when the client will let us, right? Like today, there are fewer in-person client interactions, and much of that is driven by the client preferences. But as best we can, we want to be out in front of clients, and the support team in the office just needs to understand that our biz dev folks are going to, be out of the office more often. But a lot of the support functions for sales can still be done behind the scenes, and certainly remotely. But so Kathleen, I think we should wrap. We wanted to keep this to 45 minutes because we really value everyone's time on a Friday. And I just want to thank our team for all your excellent work. The Hybrid Gap white paper, like Kathleen mentioned, we recommend you read it. There's some amazing insights in there that we weren't even able to share this morning. But there's still a path ahead, and things will continue to evolve, and we'll all have to adapt as we accept this environment. So thank you all for participating, and have a great day.
Thank you for coming. My apologies for the hybrid situation I had today, but wasn't it, maybe it was divine intervention.
Right.
Be well until we meet again. Bye-bye.
Thank you.